This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Flight data from the Ethiopian plane crash to be analyzed overseas as more countries suspend operations of Boeing's 737. This year's Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference wraps up in Beijing. And British Prime Minister Theresa May seeks an alternative way forward after her second Brexit plan is rejected. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. The African Union reiterates its commitment to ensuring a continental free trade area is achieved. And will the French president honor an invitation to attend the 25th commemoration of the Rwandan genocide? Right, let's start the hour in Ethiopia, where family and friends of those who died in Sunday's plane crash have visited the scene of the tragedy. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoy reports from Addis Ababa.
Relatives of the victims of the plane crash that happened on Sunday in a few kilometers from Addis Ababa have already started arriving in Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian Airlines has already given them accommodation, as well as it brought them here and is promising to take them back home. However, the relatives are asking how they can get the remains of their loved ones.
What I am demanding is that I get the body of my child. Whatever happened has happened. I now need to lay her to rest. I came here to see where my daughter lost her life and to make peace.
We came here to pay our respects to our friend. Even if we cannot see Mulugeta's body, we came to drop our tears where he lost his life and bid him farewell.
Investigations on the ground have already started, and it's about 3 days into the investigations. Boeing experts are already around, and we also know the investigations are being led by Ethiopian Airlines and the Ethiopia Civil Aviation Authority. And Interpol officials are supposed to have arrived, are meant to have arrived today to join in the investigations. And as investigations continue, the patience of the relatives and friends continues to wear out. But Ethiopian Airlines keeps telling them that to wait a bit so that investigators can tell them if what the way forward will be, because the information at the moment is that the scene of the crash shows that there might be a situation whereby body parts might not be able to be found or recognized at that. So at the moment it's just about waiting to see what will happen. Coletta Wanjoy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, several countries have joined the investigation team that is supporting efforts to determine the cause of the crash. The Ethiopia Airlines says the flight data recorder recovered from the crash site will now be sent overseas for analysis. Meanwhile, President Emmanuel Macron has been to Ethiopia, where he paid his condolences to the victims of Sunday's crash that killed all 149 passengers and 8 crew members on board.
Un mot de condoléances.
Allow me to express my condolences to the victims and families of the victims of last Sunday's Ethiopian Airlines air crash. You know how much we stand by you and all the families of the victims.
It's a great sadness that strikes Ethiopia. Nationals of more than 33 countries have lost their lives. More than 33 countries are victims. We will have to conduct a detailed investigation. The result of this survey will be useful not only for Ethiopia but for other countries around the world. Our technical team, in collaboration with other countries, is conducting the investigation.
Now, meanwhile, the fallout is growing for Boeing. European regulators have joined those in Asia and Latin America in grounding the 737 MAX. After 2 crashes within 6 months, at least 27 airlines have now stopped flying the jets. Here's that list, but that number may grow. Other carriers worry about nervous customers, and in the US, calls are growing from the public.
The busiest airport in the United States. But that is not the case elsewhere. More countries and airlines across the globe took the step Tuesday of banning flights by Boeing 737 MAX 8s and 9s. It follows Sunday's Ethiopian Airlines crash, the second of a 737 MAX 8 plane in less than 5 months. But Boeing and the US Federal Aviation Administration say the planes are still safe to fly. China was the first country to grant its fleet of the model and stands by the decision.
The notice of the CAAC has clearly stated that they will only ask Chinese aviation companies to lift the ban on commercial operations of the Boeing 737-8 MAX when they are assured by the US Federal Aviation Administration and Boeing that they have taken related measures to guarantee safe travel.
Boeing and American civil aviation investigators have joined in Ethiopia's search for answers in the debris at the scene of the crash site, just outside of Addis Ababa. In a statement, Boeing said, "We understand that regulatory agencies and customers have made decisions that they believe are most appropriate for their home markets. We'll continue to engage with them to ensure they have the information needed to have confidence in operating their fleets." Over the years, Boeing has established a robust reputation for safety. And although it's too early to make any kind of judgment with the investigation just beginning, these two crashes in swift succession raise questions that threaten to undermine that status. Dennis Cullerton is the CEO of Cullerton Strategies, a company that specializes in crisis management. He feels Boeing should have taken a more proactive approach, grounding the planes and an abundance of caution.
They're working behind the scenes to get to the bottom of what went wrong, if anything, with their aircraft. But the problem is they also keep that very confidential and very behind the scenes. And I think that they're missing out on an opportunity or a necessity to communicate with the flying public, their ultimate customers, their customers, and the markets. And using this moment of truth as an opportunity to remind everybody that this is what we stand for.
In Ethiopia, the families of some of the 157 people who lost their lives have been visiting the crash site. They, more than anyone else, are demanding answers to the many questions posed by this second Boeing crash. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
Well, let's get you more now on the story. We're joined from Johannesburg by Aviation Matters journalist Des Latham. Des, thank you so much for your time. Of course, the investigation is far from over, but the first step that many have taken is to ground the 737 MAX. A South African airline has followed suit. Do you think this decision is the right approach?
Of course. I mean, it's an anomaly that's occurred here. In 2017, we had an almost incident-free year in international aviation in terms of commercial airlines. We had one major incident last year, and it was a Boeing MAX. And we've had one major incident this year, and it's a Boeing MAX again. So just if you took a step back from the story, non-emotionally, and just looked as a business person and in terms of the chances of that taking place simultaneously or in coordinated fashion of that sort, you'd have to say as a manager of an airline that you must pull that aircraft from the sky until you know what's wrong.
Absolutely. Of course, Boeing in the meantime insisting that their planes are safe. But let's look at safety standards overall. We know, of course, prior to this crash, Ethiopian Airlines celebrated a very good safety record, although, its reputation, maybe some people did question it at some point. But what do we need to do to ensure that Ethiopian Airlines and indeed other African airlines maintain high safety standards going forward?
Well, you're 100% correct. I mean, IATA has on the IOS, the International Organization for Airline Safety, has credited Africa with improving safety, in particular Kenyan Airlines and Ethiopian Airlines, and even South African Airlines had a very high audit last year, for example, for the previous year. So, yes, things are getting better. As a pilot myself and also traveling around Africa, there are many things that are still problematic. The main problem, as we know, around the continent generally, not in Ethiopia at the moment, is corruption, where officials are bribed in terms of the maintenance. Parts are purchased, they're called grey parts, are purchased that aren't proper airline or the aircraft parts, and also the ATC's air traffic control, and the way in which the airspace is managed has improved vastly in the last 36 months, but there's still a long way to go. There's still chunks of Africa that there are no VORs, there's no beams, there's no beacons, there's no ways to manage the airspace, and pilots have to manage themselves over a vast part of Africa, which is unlike, for example, China or the EU, where you're managed from country to country. So things are getting better, but I've outlined the major problems.
Des Latham, thank you so much, joining us there from Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, turning to some other news, let's go to Beijing now, where this year's session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference has wrapped up. The country's top political advisors passed the work report from the Standing Committee of the body's National Committee. They also approved an examination of proposals and a political resolution. Our reporter Zo Yoon has more.
The 11-day session has come to an end, but the efforts in promoting social and economic development continue. China's top political advisor Wang Yang reviewed the work of the CPPCC Standing Committee.
All CPPCC members have carried out in-depth discussions on the government's work report and other important documents of the two sessions. They gave insightful advice and reached fruitful results.
During this session, the advisory body submitted more than 5,000 proposals addressing the most pressing issues for China's development. Major topics include fighting the three battles of preventing major risks, alleviating poverty, and controlling pollution. They also covered maintaining healthy economic development and improving people's livelihood.
We should further optimize the socialist system with Chinese characteristics and promote the modernization of the national governance system. We should further carry out reforms to improve our consultative body's functions and develop a mature system for a democratic consultative system.
The end of the CPPCC annual session doesn't mean the work is over for its members. Actually, it means another new start for them to help promote the shared political belief, as well as contributing more wisdom towards building a nation of greater openness and prosperity. So, CGTN, Beijing.
Let's bring you the very latest now from the conclusion of the CPPCC. CGTN's Uche Koronkwo joins us live from Beijing. Uche, of course, this year's session has now wrapped up. Just talk us through the key highlights and the main resolutions.
Thank you, Lindy. Now, of course, the CPPCC is China's national political advisory body, and it's important to note that its main role is to deliberate and come up with proposals on issues affecting the country over the past year. Now, of course, we saw them table, as she mentioned earlier, about 5,000 proposals, 30% of them focusing on the economy, 30% of them focusing on social affairs, the rest on political structural issues. Some of the key focus for the CPPCC this year, of course, is on poverty alleviation in the country, boosting innovation in the private sector, stabilizing financial structures going forward. Interesting one, controlling risks around rising local debt, especially in the public sector. As we know, China's rising debt is a big concern right now. And of course, they also put forward proposals on key issues such as the environment and, of course, green development going forward.
And which, as you mentioned, 5,000 proposals. That's a very daunting figure. What happens next as far as implementing those proposals, all those resolutions, and how are they likely to impact citizens?
Now, as you mentioned, Lindy, the basic or the major and main role of the CPPCC is to deliberate and come up with proposals. Now, that goes to the NPC, the National People's Congress, and the relevant government agencies. And of course, they make the final decision in terms of policy direction going into the next year. Now, that's not to say the role of the CPPCC is not important. They're actually, it is actually made up of about 2,000 or over 2,000 delegates from different parts of China's society, civil society organizations, political parties. They come from different regions, and across different sectors as well, Lindy. And their role is basically to give insight into what the people are looking to see from the government, because they go out into this different areas of the country, different sectors, do research, come up with proposals, come up with the issues that are affecting the people, and these are the proposals they deliberate on before it's passed on. And of course we see final direction coming out from the NPC. Now of course the NPC's final meeting will be on the 15th of March, which of course is this Saturday, and that's when we'll hear what the policy direction or what the final decisions will be on some of these proposals, some of these 5,000 proposals, Lindy.
Indeed, we look forward to catching up again with you closer to that time. Thank you so much, Uche Okoronkwo, joining us there live from Beijing. Well, indeed, over the past week, more than 2,000 CPPCC members, as we've heard, from all walks of life, have pushed proposals for this year's 2 sessions.
Some local governments intervened in the market with administrative methods to clear the inefficiency capacity. We must rely on the market mechanism to achieve that result.
If a nation only develops natural science and engineering technology, but ignores philosophy and social science, then development is unsustainable. My proposal is to set up national awards for philosophy and social science, so that they will receive more attention.
I think there are 2 very important things for the development of the private sector. One is fair competition, and the other is a better legal environment.
I believe basketball will give people more than a different experience. It can help the youth learn the importance of cooperation, of individual efforts, and how to better deal with the setbacks in their life.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, British Prime Minister Theresa May seeks an alternative way forward after her second Brexit plan is rejected. And will the French president honor an invitation to attend the 25th commemoration of the Rwandan genocide?
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
British Prime Minister Theresa May is looking for a new way forward. This after facing yet another rejection of her Brexit plan. In 2 weeks, the United Kingdom is expected to leave the European Union, although Parliament will vote twice more this week. CGTN's Richard Bestick reports from London.
Defeated again, this time by 149 votes.
The ayes to the right, 242. The noes to the left, 391.
UK Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal resoundingly rejected by Parliament. The Prime Minister immediately outlined possible parliamentary paths ahead.
Does it want to hold a second referendum? Does it want to leave with a deal but not this deal? These are unenviable choices. But thanks to the decision that the House has made this evening, they are choices that must now be faced.
It was this man who ultimately proved to be May's harbinger of doom, Attorney General Geoffrey Cox. Despite a last-minute dash to Brussels in the hope of securing legally binding assurances, Cox told the government the legal risks remained unchanged. Theresa May's Brexit deal was on the ropes. assuming over the coming days Parliament votes against a no-deal Brexit and in favour of moving the Brexit deadline, Mrs May could be in Brussels next week seeking a Brexit delay from the EU.
Brexit protesters remain in good voice, but the question politically is where to now for the UK. There's talk of a general election and possibly an end to Theresa May's premiership. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Where to now, indeed? Let's try answer that very question with CGTN's Richard Bestick. He joins us live in London, and we're also joined by Kevin Osbeck. He's with us from Brussels. Richard, let's start with you. Of course, another crushing defeat for Theresa May, some might say was not entirely unexpected. But just to begin with, where does this leave Theresa May now as Prime Minister?
Well, I think there's little doubt, Lindy, that the authority of the Prime Minister is diminishing fast, and in particular her control over Brexit. You heard her standing up there in Parliament, reacting immediately after that defeat at the hands of the opposition party and something in the region of 79 of her own members of Parliament. And she then gave a free vote on what the Parliament will be considering today, and that is whether a no deal Brexit should be taken off the table. Now that was a central plank of her Brexit means Brexit, a no deal is better than a bad deal argument, and she's now handed that authority over to Parliament. And it's got to be said as well that her negotiating position in Brussels, one newspaper, the Financial Times in London, today described as lying in tatters. I'm meeting an increasing number of members of Parliament who are now openly talking of her premiership coming to a close. There was in the last hour or so a cabinet meeting. There are those talking about cabinet members turning against her, telling her really the time is up. And later on this afternoon, around about 5 p.m. London time, there will be a meeting of what's called the 1922 Committee. And this is made up of all the backbenchers. She hasn't yet said whether she'll be addressing them. But if she does, you can be guaranteed, Lindy, that the mood that she'll meet when she enters that room will be one of anger and frustration.
She's facing a very tough time indeed. Kevin, let's come to you in Brussels. Theresa May reiterated time and time again that this indeed was the very best deal on the table. Now, considering what has happened to that deal in that vote last night, what is the European Union likely to offer? Are they willing at all to offer a softer deal, considering the Brexit vote defeat in the UK?
Well, at least for right now, they are not willing to offer the UK anything else. In fact, just a few minutes ago, we heard from Michel Barnier, the chief EU Brexit negotiator. He was addressing MEPs over in Strasbourg, where right now the European Parliament is in session. He said, what else can we offer the UK? After all, we have to make sure that that border on the island of Ireland stays open. We also have to preserve the integrity of our single market. And he said that deal that has been on the table is the only deal that is available. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, going into the vote last night, said this is the UK's second chance, and there will be no more third chance. What we are getting from the messaging from EU leaders right now is that essentially they've had it, and what they desperately want from the UK is some sort of game plan. What type of Brexit do they want? What type of Brexit would pass in the UK House of Commons? So they say in order for this Brexit gridlock to move on, in order to reach past this impasse, we need answers from the UK. There's nothing we can do in Brussels. This all stems now from London.
And that's true. It's really trying to figure out what the game plan is. Coming back to you, Richard, we know Theresa May spoke of unenviable choices that the country is facing. You touched on a vote that's set to take place today. Just tell us what to expect over the next 2 weeks.
Well, intriguingly, the vote today gives us a clue as to the outlook of the UK Prime Minister. And it seems that the game plan remains pretty much the same. MPs, members of Parliament, will be discussing taking off the table a no-deal Brexit. Now, it's assumed widely here that will be passed. Parliamentarians, business and industry are fearful in the extreme of the economic consequences of a no-deal Brexit. It would be, in the view of the Treasury and the Bank of England, absolutely disastrous. But note this, the Prime Minister has added to the motion that will go before the House a little addendum, a little addition, suggesting that no deal remains the default position. And in law, at the moment, it does. But we have now only 16 days to go. We have a Prime Minister who seems to be locked in to presenting over and over again her rejected deal to Parliament, and little way out of that. There is talk already around this place that she will be representing that deal of hers to Parliament for a third time at some stage, if her premiership survives. So today, the vote, and it will succeed, will take no deal off the table, and then tomorrow we'll see a situation where MPs vote to extend the 16-day deadline on Brexit. We really then are into unknown territory. We really have no idea of where Britain is going, and indeed where Brexit's going.
Indeed, and of course that's uncharted waters applies to the EU, the deadline.
So the EU does not want a no-deal Brexit. It's viewed that that would be just so painful, so hurtful to EU firms here who do business with the UK. Also, the EU wants to make sure that after Brexit, there's a very good working relationship in terms of both trade as well as security with the UK. It's going to be a very close neighbor. It wants to make sure it will stay a very close partner. But at the same time, the EU does not want to just keep extending this process and this period of such great uncertainty. That's why it's calling on the UK to develop a game plan. In the messages released from EU leaders just after the vote last night, another one of the themes that came up in their messaging and in their tweets was the UK can't just come here and ask to extend Article 50. If it's going to do that, it needs to have real, reasonable and justified reasons why we should extend this process. The EU is worried that extending this process could disrupt the functioning of the European Parliament. At the end of May, there's going to be EU-wide elections to reshape the European Parliament. All of the dozens of MEP seats that the UK currently holds have already been divvied up or eliminated. So this is not just a simple extension. This really could create so many headaches by trying to prolong this process, especially if the UK still is not firm exactly what type of Brexit it wants.
Absolutely, and with just 16 days to go before that Brexit deadline, it really is important to see how they navigate these uncharted waters. Thanks very much to Richard there, and of course Kevin joining us from London and Brussels. Now, as we heard from our correspondents, later on Wednesday, British MPs will vote again, this time on whether the country should leave the EU without a deal. Predictions for a no-deal scenario have ranged from bad to worse. Let's take a look at some possibilities in the event of a hard Brexit.
What happens under a no-deal scenario? Here are some likelihoods. Trade. The UK will have to trade with the EU and other countries under World Trade Organization rules. Out of the bloc's single market, the UK could face higher tariffs for some British exports, including cars. British firms could also face more restrictions when they do business inside the EU. Travel. Under the political declaration setting out the framework for future ties, London said that the principle of free movement of people between the EU and the UK would no longer apply. The EU said Britons would need to get travel permits to visit mainland Europe. Healthcare. The UK government confirmed that Britons in the EU could experience limitations to their access to healthcare services, For example, after March 29th, UK nationals' European health insurance card may no longer be valid. Banking. The government warned that using British bank cards inside the EU to pay for goods and services may become more expensive. Ireland. Britain could see a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. This would mean customs and security checks along the border. But while critics say a no-deal Brexit would be catastrophic, London could still work to turn things around. It would be able to negotiate free trade deals beyond the EU. It would also be able to save billions worth of contributions to the EU budget and control migration.
And turning to other news now, President Emmanuel Macron is on a 4-day visit to the Horn of Africa region. Macron is looking to nurture relationships on the continent. On Tuesday, Ethiopia and France agreed their first military cooperation accord. This deal includes helping the landlocked nation build a navy as Paris seeks to boost mutual economic ties. Macron had come from Djibouti, where he visited his country's military base. Djibouti houses France's largest military base in Africa. Macron is next expected in Kenya for talks with President Uhuru Kenyatta later on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Rwanda has extended an invitation to French President Macron to the 25th commemoration of the Rwandan genocide. Rwanda had accused France of supporting the Hutu regime and playing a role in the genocide. France has consistently denied any involvement. Relations between the two countries have improved, with Macron supporting Rwanda's pick for Secretary General of the Francophonie organization. If Macron accepts the invitation, it will make him the second French president to visit Rwanda since the genocide.
Le Rwanda nous a en effet invités.
Rwanda has invited us to these commemorations. We have taken note of it, and France, I can confirm, will be represented at these commemorations. With respect to the 737 flight bans, the Minister of Transport is in the process of reviewing the situation with all the technical services, and decisions will be made in an informed and timely manner.
The Deputy High Commissioner for the UN Refugee Agency, Kelly Clement, is calling for more global solidarity for Uganda, which currently hosts more than 1.2 million refugees. While concluding a 5-day trip to Uganda, the Commissioner expressed appreciation to the country's open-door policy for refugees. During her visit, matters of health, environment and education were raised as key concerns. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency has announced the reallocation of $100,000 to focus on education for more than 500 refugees in Uganda.
The types of activities that we want to help to support the government of Uganda is additional schools, classrooms, teachers, helping with school fees, as I mentioned, in terms of the uniforms, supplies, and other ways to make it more possible for kids to go to school. And I think the next conversation we will be having will relate to how we can use the technology we have potentially to reach those children that aren't able to physically be within a classroom.
Coming up in your business news, up next. The African Union reiterates its commitment to ensuring a continental free trade area is achieved. And Tunisia seeks to cement its position as a destination for medical tourism.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, the African Union says it will ensure that regional integration, a continental free trade area, and overall continental development are achieved soon. AU Commissioner for Economic Affairs Victor Harrison, however, told CGTN's Kirum Chala that member states must show diligence and strong political will for the continental plan to bear fruit.
This is a great meeting and a rich theme, transform, productive transformation. How to accelerate the productive transformation. As main result, as main recommendation, infrastructure, to improve the infrastructure. If not, you cannot improve the trade intra-Africa. Okay, and you know the place of agriculture. Everyone recognizes the necessity to make effort to improve the agriculture. After the agriculture, the agro-industry. You need infrastructure, you need electricity, you need energy. But you need the capacity building.
Commissioner, discussions, as you said, are ongoing, but I would like to understand what kind of recommendations you are suggesting member states to consider to achieve that final productive transformation across Africa.
A leadership and will, a determination to define the priority and to make effort to achieve the vision. It's a political will with a determination. Look the example for Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a vision, and Ethiopia has a determination to achieve this vision. It's necessary to mobilization of domestic resource. It's very important. The mobilization of domestic. You see, during this meeting, you have the participation of Association of African Central Bank, of participation of African Stock Exchange Association. That you give the opportunity to how to find the funds for the development. And it's necessary for me to continue the mobilization of domestic resources.
Tunisia is hosting the first International Medical Guest Forum. Participants believe that the coordination between specialists in medical tourism and investors will boost medical tourism in Africa and the region. The forum has attracted participants from more than 20 African, Asian, European and Arab countries.
Tunisia is hosting the first International Medical Guest Forum. The event has been organized by the Tunisian Association for Health, Tourism and Wellness in collaboration with the General Federation of Health and the Union Chamber of Private Clinics. The forum aims to promote the exchange of experiences and the consolidation of international cooperation in health tourism.
This forum aims to make the evolution of the sector of the medical tourism known, particularly in hospital care, medical services and assistance to promoting Tunisia as a destination of medical tourism.
Experts believe that boosting the medical tourism industry will revive the economy in Tunisia. The North African state aims to attract over 500,000 visitors who will be looking for both medical treatment as well as tourism experiences.
Tunisia aims to become a hub for medical tourism in the region. The country welcomed over 6 million tourists last year. Medical tourism is still below expectation, but the revival of this vital sector is guaranteed in the next 3 years. It's one of the state's main objectives.
Several delegations from 15 countries, including 7 African nations, are taking part in the international forum. Representatives of travel agencies stressed the need to develop their business and improve their service for medical tourists.
Travel agencies are modernizing their operations. Therefore, diversifying and digitizing services are among the structural reforms. Health tourism is on the rise in Africa. Together with our Tunisian partners, we can assist patients from Africa and guarantee the best services.
Tunisian and foreign experts emphasized the need to establish a national strategy based on a public and private sector partnership in order to boost health tourism and its global dimension. According to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Tourism, Tunisia has developed a modern infrastructure for medical tourism, including hotels and private clinics. Experts believe that many Tunisian and African companies can offer medical tourism packages for lower costs and good quality service. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
South African pharmaceutical company Aspen Holdings is in major financial trouble, the extent of which emerged when the company recently released its interim financial results to the end of December. The company, which was worth $8.5 billion several months ago, is now worth one-third of that. Angela Coppola has the details.
Analysts say that the chief issue is that the company used debt instead of equity to fund its foreign expansion.
It's all about the trajectory which the management team set upon in 2014, where they went big, buying into the global pharma industry, focusing on anesthetics and those thrombosis drugs. Big ticket purchases, funded with debt, raised mostly in Europe, and it was all going well. You know, they were able to do these deals. These were assets, typically older drug lines that these companies like AstraZeneca and Merck and GlaxoSmithKline didn't want anymore.
But the company couldn't achieve the sales levels needed to meet their debt obligations and began selling assets.
The milk business, when they sell that, that'll generate about 10 billion. But even if at 44, 45 billion rand debt, that's a large debt pile. It's at or around their market cap. It certainly is creating concerns for investors. They're in breach of debt covenants, but the banks have let that slide for now. But it's the debt, I think, is the worry.
And then there's the role of the regulators.
An acquisition that has been modestly delayed because of regulatory sign-off being a month or two behind the curve. The net result is you have a giant South African business under cash flow strain.
And in short, what's happened is they've gone from a high-flying 40 PE stock doing plus 30, 40% growth per year to a maturing business. And that's caught the market by surprise, spooked it, and debt levels are worrying them.
Analysts say the business is fundamentally sound. It's diversified, its distribution systems operate optimally, and it earns hard currencies.
There are certainly those who think that this business will survive, Stephen Saad himself in particular, and so he's going to be doing whatever it takes in order to get us there.
While the company's share price is at near record lows, it could rebound fairly quickly.
The sell-off, I would venture, if you get a couple of these needle movers to shift in the right direction, the sell-off potentially makes for a compelling investment case.
For those long-suffering shareholders, there might be some light at the end of the tunnel as the share price starts moving in the right direction. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
World Wide Web designer Tim Berners-Lee returned to his groundbreaking invention's birthplace, the CERN Physics Research Center outside Geneva. This, of course, to mark the web's 30th anniversary on Tuesday. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
In March 1989, a British scientist submitted his first proposal for what would be revolutionary global technology. It was in the form of a memo with a complex design of arrows, boxes, circles, and bubbles. 30 years later, the World Wide Web remains imperfect, at least according to the inventor. Berners-Lee is now advocating for a contract for the web, composed of 9 principles that aims to change the web for the better.
50% of humanity is now using this web thing. So at that point as well, you've got to step back and look. And so what the Web Foundation has done is say, well, there's only 2 things to do. One is get the other half online as quickly as possible, of course, because it is becoming more and more unfair that they aren't. And the other is for the people who are online, whoops, the web is not the web we wanted in every respect.
Not to be confused with the Internet, which is the network of globally interconnected computers, the World Wide Web is how people share information on the Internet. In an open letter published, Berners-Lee said many people now felt unsure about whether the web was a force for good. But it would be defeatist and unimaginative to assume that it could not change for the better in the next 30 years.
It is practical. We don't need to get out of the house to shop. Considering our daily life nowadays, it's pretty practical.
I'm not very talented in doing some things, but I use the internet to obtain information, to read the news, to buy train tickets, if I'm adept enough to do so.
It is sure that it can be scary. Today, when we look through Google and see our past and our daily travels, it raises questions. It is scary. But at the same time, if we don't impose strict controls over the internet, then who would be in charge? According to which norms? This also raises questions.
While the internet itself already existed in 1989 in the form of large networks of connected computers, the British scientist's proposal is now credited as the first step toward the World Wide Web as we know it today. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Now, over in the US, a man has pleaded guilty to charges of fraud in what is considered the largest bribery scheme in the country's college admissions history. He ran a $25 million scheme that fraudulently helped wealthy parents secure admissions for their children at elite universities. This since 2011. William Rick Singer pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy and 3 other counts in a case that has led to charges against 49 other people, including celebrities. The founder of William Edge College and Career Network arranged for fake testers to take college admissions exams and bribed coaches to give admission slots meant to be reserved for recruited athletes. According to prosecutors, parents paid from $100,000 to as much as $2.5 million per child for services marked as contributions to a scam charity. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, we tell you about a domesticated animal that is hogging the limelight because of its artistic talent.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in South Africa now, where a rescued pig is gaining the public's attention for its creativity. The pig's ability to create bright, bold strokes across canvas continues to amaze.
The domesticated animal, now fondly referred to as Pig Castle, was rescued as a piglet and brought to a farm in South Africa's Western Cape region in 2016. Over the years, the farm owners noticed her love for color and paintbrushes.
She basically ate or destroyed everything except these paintbrushes. And I thought, gosh, maybe there's something in there, because it was really strange that she loved them so much. And it just took a bit of positive reinforcement, and to be honest, it wasn't long before she was picking them up, going towards the canvas and creating these amazing masterpieces that are now sold all over the world.
Picasso's paintings sell for as much as $4,000 with the proceeds going to animal welfare. Swiss watchmaker Swatch announced a collaboration with the pig last month, confident that Picasso's work could be the best-selling item in their portfolio.
I mean, if an international watch brand like Swatch can align themselves to something as different as this, it means they're also looking for something innovative, something different to what they've been doing, what they've been seeing. So it works.
Sometimes I'll look at her artworks and I'll see something that as a human I can see, like a dolphin shape, or there'll be a facial feature which makes it that much more interesting. But ultimately it's definitely abstractive artworks, and every time she paints a picture she always finishes it by dipping her nose into beetroot ink, and she takes it towards the canvas, and that makes it an authentic original Picasso.
Picasso's art was taken on tour last year, with some of her pieces being showcased in South Africa, UK, France, Germany and the Netherlands. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Still in South Africa, Triggerfish is a studio that has been breaking new ground in the animation world by creating African-centered stories for African audiences. The animation films produced have seen the team behind the studio earn international recognition for their work. CGTN's Terry Wangari has their story.
Day after day, Dad, you teach me to look after myself.
Adventures of Zambezia, an animation film lauded by critics for being among the best South African animation films ever created. The film, which was released in 2012, was made and produced by Triggerfish Animation Studios. It went on to make over $34 million at the box office, cementing the company as a trailblazer in African animation movies.
A lot of the content we do get that does get produced in this medium is very Eurocentric and quite Western, and I think there's definitely a big value in diversifying that content in this industry. And also there's a lot of Afrocentric stories that can be told, and that can really give productions a very high value.
With a slew of accolades, including a 2018 Academy Award nomination for Best Short Film and numerous South African Film Awards, Triggerfish is now at the forefront of the industry. The Cape Town-based company is currently the largest animation studio on the continent, producing African-themed stories. The company's founders say they wanted to create a diverse narrative for African children where they can see themselves represented on the screen and have an alternative to foreign animations.
I think animation is it's the kind of grandest type of storytelling. So you can do anything. It's whatever you can imagine, you can create, and you can use metaphor and talking animals, and so it's just it's a great way to communicate, because you can bring across stories that can't be told in any other way.
Triggerfish is in the process of establishing the Triggerfish Academy, an initiative with the Walt Disney Company which will teach industry-based skills to young people who may not have the means to follow a career path in animation.
So Triggerfish have been going for quite a while. I'd say that they've managed to produce features where others have been unsuccessful. So they're creating and producing their own content, which is fantastic, within the feature space, which is huge. They've just opening up a Triggerfish Academy, which is fantastic because they really are all about growing and developing skills.
The Cape Town-based company also recently moved into the gaming industry, establishing itself as a player in another budding South African market. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in your sports news. Up next, Cristiano Ronaldo leads Juventus